Hi, friends. Welcome to Beyond Damascus. This is the show where encounter meets mission. I am your host for today's show, Aaron Richards, and thank you for joining us in this illustrious Damascus Media studio. I'm here with my friends and brothers in Christ, Mr. Dan Demite. Dan, welcome. Mr. Brad Pearson.
Yes, sir.
Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you.
Did the high five
It's just
hurt
crisp.
this time?
No, it's just crisp.
It hurt. I'm in pain, actually. You should not wound
I think it just
your
knocked
brother.
the carpal tunnel out of my wrist. Actually,
It's
punishment.
It's an act of healing and restoration.
Endearment.
If a high five doesn't sting for at least 10 to 15 seconds after it's been given, then does it really count?
That's a hot take.
Did you
Let's
really
see.
high five a person?
Meet us in the comments. Let us know.
I gave a teaching to our missionary body on handshakes, on good professional handshakes.
Yeah, that's an important thing to teach.
That's
and
an adulting
I
thing,
shared
yeah.
a testimony of one day when I gave a very firm and aggressive handshake to a woman at Mass,
Uh-oh.
and she like crumbled because she had just had surgery on her hand.
Oh,
But she foolishly gave it to me to shake and
No.
like assumed that I wouldn't squeeze her hand.
jeez, you're so violent. People,
That's supposed to be an impartation of peace, Aaron. Like, that's a very specific part of the mass.
That's why they just bow now.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man,
right.
Was
They
it,
just
we thought it
kinda
was
wink.
COVID. No, it was actually Aaron that ruined the sign of peace.
if you're watching, I am sorry.
I repent.
Thanks for joining us on the show. Here at Beyond Damascus, we want to be not only a show about mission, but a show on mission. And of course, every week for the last few episodes, the last
Few.
dozen or so
Yeah,
episodes, we've been able to share that we have a awesome benefactor of Damascus who has agreed that for every new subscriber to this show, that we will be given a wonderful gift of $10 to support the work of Catholic Youth Summer Camp, our flagship program here at Damascus. So if you want to send campers to camp, subscribe to the show, send it to approximately 1 million of your closest friends.
That would-
Every
Take a long
show we start with a question of the week, and then we wrap it up with a mission of the week. Brad, Jack,
Yes.
Dan thinks that your beard is beautiful.
I'm trying to get my beard that long. That might be
bearding?
why the
I
slip
do
happened.
need to cut it. I need to cut everything. My hair is atrocious.
I'm sorry. I need to cut everything.
the atrocious Jack.
Do you want to talk?
Wow.
Do you want to talk? Do you want to talk
Atrocious
through it?
beard
No, I'm just
Jack.
kidding.
Are we gonna get
No,
to
we're
this
going to the question.
episode?
Sorry.
Jack, could you share the question of the week with us, brother?
Yes, finally. The question of the week is, how do I defend myself against someone who is actively opposing what I believe in?
Wow.
How do I defend myself?
Actively
Against
oppose.
someone-
A lot of people actively oppose me.
That's not true.
Dan stays in his regular stance of
Yeah.
life. No, I'll take a first shot at it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the reason I want to take a first stab at it is because I'm kind of passionate about this. So, how do I defend myself against someone who is actively opposing what I believe in? So, I would say first, and I'm sure all of us will give this disclaimer, but make sure the thing that you're believing in, that you're wanting to defend, is worth defending in the way that you're desiring to. But with that disclaimer, I think let's take some wisdom from like the apologetic teachers of the church. So one of the key areas. So let's suggest, I'm not saying this is your exact experience if you're the one that's asking the question, but just to give a scenario, if you're in a college philosophy class and you have a professor that's allowing debate to happen, and you have someone in your class that's regularly going against what you have come to know as the truth passed down by the church, how would you go about that conversation? Because you're like, man, they're really riding me every time I say something in that class. Well, the first thing you would want to do in conversation with that person is find common ground. So, like a classic example of this, right, would be like, okay, this person thinks Jesus is an exceptional human being, but not God. Okay, great. So what can we agree on? We can agree that Jesus existed. We can agree that Jesus taught good things. We can agree that Jesus loved the people around him. Like, get to all of the things that you agree with, and then allow yourself to state very clearly the point of distinction. And this can be hard sometimes because that's the point when conflict will happen. But I've noticed in my life and in the teachings that I've listened to on apologetics, when you get to that place, if you can clearly label it, now all of a sudden the conversation's free flowing and you're not dancing around what exactly are we saying. So if it was the example I was giving earlier and you were in your philosophy class and it was someone that believed that Jesus was a good person, but not the Son of God, I don't know if that would even happen if you're on a public campus, but we'll stay with it. You would just be like, so, and with all that, I have come to believe that Jesus is God. And it seems to me, based on just our interactions throughout this class, that you would say he is not. Is that right? And then the moment they can claim that is the moment that we actually know what the disagreement is. And now we can have a conversation. And I think there is a lot of that that's offensive, I guess, but the defensiveness is actually getting it all out there so I can know what the person's actually trying to say and what they're up to. Because that's the big goal there. It's actually funny. One of the guys I listen to really regularly is Dr. Jordan Peterson, and he talks about a guy, a famous clinical psychologist named Carl Rogers. And Carl was giving this amazing like insight into how to interact with a spouse whenever you're in a disagreement. And ultimately his very succinct like action step is whenever your spouse is disagreeing with you, make sure that you get to exactly what they're talking about. So in turn, like if your spouse is saying something and you're like, oh, that's totally wrong. Like I want to get in that right now. Don't do that. Instead, let them say everything they have to say. Once they're done, actually even asking like, is there anything else like on that? Is that, can I paraphrase back to you and then paraphrase back to them what they're saying? And then they have to agree that you're adequately paraphrasing what they're saying. Because now you're having a common conversation and that allows conflict to go so much better. And that'll be the point at which you know if conflict's even possible. Because if the person walks away at that moment, at least you know what you disagreed with and you're going to agree to disagree at that moment, right? But again, if you're wanting to lean in, that would be the best way apologetically. That would be the best way relationally, at least in my experience and what I've heard. So again, I want to answer it on its face. I'm sure you guys will bring maybe a more personal touch, but that's like on its face, like come to a place of common understanding, clearly label the point of conflict, and then have a conversation from there and be willing to contend.
I think you do that really well, Brad, in relation, because you're like always talking to random people that like have a opinion contrary to your own, and you maintain patience during that whole process too. So like I think that's maintaining curiosity and patience and sincere like community with the person. I think is one of the reasons you're so effective at that. Where sometimes I get like too boistered up, and like that can it's actually knock them back.
It's funny. You know how those like one-liners that like a grandpa or a father gives you will stick with you? My grandpa, before he passed, I was young, and he just said this like throwaway line, and probably no one else remembers it, but he was talking to all of us cousins. And my grandpa said, there's not a single person in the world that you'll meet that can't teach you something you don't know. And it just, like I said, maybe none of my cousins remember that. For whatever reason, my whole life that's stuck with me.
Yep.
And so when I'm in a conversation, like I'm wanting to teach in ways every conversation I'm in. I'm wanting to kind of get my thoughts out there because I'm external. But yeah, like that person might have the thing that actually makes your point stronger if you listen well enough, even if they're disagreeing. And like it allows you to actually come into contact with, well, more of the truth, more of the thing you believe in, if we go back to the question. So
can I have my turn to affirm Brad?
Sure, go ahead. Go affirm him.
Go on.
No, Brad, you do this consistently too, and it's really helpful in the course of conversation, even amongst like trying to wrestle out the right idea of actually honoring someone's concept, and as you see maybe a flaw in their concept, being like, well, maybe you could even make that stronger by like let me suggest that this concept could be the word you use is steel man, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna give the steel man version of this instead of the straw man to be able to lift them up, to honor them, so that we can disagree, with all the cards on the table.
Well, that's right, because even if you go back to the last episode we had where Dan, you were talking about like us making enemies of people sometimes. Like the person that you're in that disagreement with that's going against what you believe in, if you can get them to a place where you can be human with them, that's where conversation happens. Like no one's going to want to listen to you just berate their ideas.
Yeah. I love that. I think too, just you said find the common value that like even a pro-choice versus pro-life, the argument is often so like fighting at each other, but they have like those two people have so much common ground.
So much,
like,
yes.
So what is the common ground, and get to that place first and allow the conversation to be honoring towards the person for, hey, we both value the dignity of women. Like, thank you, Jesus. Like, we both value freedom, and we both like there are values that we have in alignment. And then the conclusions of those values have that's what we need to discuss. But let's start with common value.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. All right, I'll go. Woo, woo. All right. So, how do I defend myself against someone who is actively opposing what I believe in? I did make this joke, but I think I can speak a little bit from experience because I have been actively opposed a lot in my life, and I'm a very bold,
Pretty oppositional person.
Yeah, I'm a very bold person.
Opposable.
Yeah, opposable person. I have two opposable thumbs, and
well, you're a make it better guy.
Yeah. So, but I think initially I really was out to defend myself against, and I would say that's not the right question to ask, because when I was out to defend myself against people, I got myself into more trouble, and I wasn't living the gospel. And so I think ultimately the question is, how can I love the person who is actively opposing my opinion or
what
I believe in? And because we're called to love our enemies. So if this person is actively opposing you, to some extent, they are an assault against you. They are an enemy. And so what do I do to love them? How do I live the gospel in this moment? When I was defensive, it usually turned into broken relationships and more problems than good. And so I think the key is just to ask, how do I love? How do I love? And love happens in relationship, not in talking about others behind their back. And so I think there's one of two things happens. When there's someone actively opposing you, you either have to build the relationship or you have to kick the dust from your feet, right? So when it comes to Jack looking at all of the comments to the people who actively oppose our what we believe in on our YouTube channel, we just wipe the dust from our feet. We're not going to engage in a defense or a conversation or a love to actively to engage. We wipe the dust from our feet. But in relationship, if
we love all comments.
Well, we love the comments.
You can keep them.
I'm not reaching out to like Piper 17 saying like, hey, I realize you really hate the Eucharist. Should we have coffee? You know, like, and so, but there are people who like have actively opposed some of the things that we're teaching. And so what we like to do is actually reach out to them and ask them for a conversation and say, hey, I notice there's tension here. I have heard that you're in disagreement. Would you be willing to have a conversation? And if that person is willing to have a conversation, boom, like you have your next step on how to love them, right? If they're not willing to, chances are you're just gonna have to wipe the dust from your feet. And if they're willing to have a conversation, then really just genuinely ask them for their perspective and seek first to understand than to be understood. And then ask them, hey, is it okay if I share my perspective in this as well? So first seek to understand and then help build their understanding as well. And I think ultimately the goal is love. The goal is communion. The goal may not always result in agreement, right? But at least you're not hating each other. And I think it's even possible to say there's tension in this relationship. Can we at least acknowledge the fact that we should respect and honor each other as opposed to speak ill of each other? And I think even Aaron and I are in times where we've been in tough situations, getting to a place of, all right, we're going to choose honor for this person, even if they actively oppose us. We're not going to speak ill of them. And trying to get on that common ground, I think is really helpful. And then I'll just share one other example. I had a family member who he and I were on different wavelengths about something. And he was actively opposing. He was kind of going out very frustrated because it was the result of a wound he had, and it was a justifiable wound. But I didn't treat it as a justifiable wound at first. I became very defensive, and I shut him down. I got together with him, but I was kind of arrogant, and I didn't listen to him, and I didn't actually think through what he was going through. I just was like, no, I disagree. And it wasn't until but at that point we said, okay, we disagree with each other. Let's just be cordial at family events. And it wasn't until years later that I kind of humbled myself and realized, I was kind of a jerk when I was engaging in conversation with him. And I didn't realize I was being so defensive, but I was. So I just asked, hey, can we hang out again? And I apologized for my defensive nature and asked him if we could engage in a better, healthier conversation. And we ended up like having actually the same perspective. We weren't off with each other. And it was my defensiveness that actually didn't allow us to get to that point. And it was also his hurt that didn't allow us to get to that point at the beginning. But years later, we were able to heal that relationship because I was humble and seeking to understand rather than be understood. And he wasn't operating out of a place of hurt. He had been healed. And I think two healed people and humbled people can engage in healthy relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the example there with your family member, because it's so easy when we're in a defensive posture to be dismissive instead of permissive.
Yeah.
Like to just dismiss everything they're saying instead of to permit what they're saying so that we can actually get to the bottom of it. Because a defensive, but it's funny because I mean, and this is why, and you guys know this, but sports is a huge part of my life. Like one of the reasons I love basketball is because if you're playing defense in basketball and you're overly dismissive, meaning you're trying to keep the person from moving at all, you're just going to be perpetually fouling them. You're just going to the game won't be, you will not be able to play the game. Like defense is enough permission to where they can move. And then I block off at the right time, right? Like I cut that lane off. I don't allow him to go here. And but then sometimes they'll still score on me. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, that was actually and if you think about that in the context of a conversation, it's like, yeah, that was a good point. Yeah, I didn't see that when I stood here and you moved there. Like that can actually be fun when we give permission, because then all of a sudden it's play. It's relationship, because relationships are predicated on play and conversation in real life. So anyway, I like that dichotomy. If you're if you're asking this question, check your heart. If you're in a place of defensiveness and your natural move is to dismissiveness, try to permit as much as you can, because the moment you start, no one wants to be dismissed right off the bat. No one's going to want to talk to you if that's the case.
Yep.
I give a example in one of my teachings with the missionaries on restoring or overcoming conflict. It's a principle called strength determines load. So like if you envision, you can't play tug of war with a person using a piece of thread, because it's going to break and you're never going to be able to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So if you actually want to be able to engage meaningfully in conflict, you have to have a strength of relationship. So it also just may be the case that like, it'd be great to conflict with you over this, but we don't have the basis on which to do it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I need to step in and ask, am I willing to do the work to build this relationship to the point where we can actually resolve this?
Yeah.
Or do I just need to walk away?
For something to be held in tension, the thing that unites has to be strong enough to stay in the tension.
Yeah. Okay. Here's my 2 cents for today.
Oh, come on.
1.5.
Oh, yeah, 1.5.
Good job. It's impossible to get a half penny, so you just gave yourself more credit than actual. You had one in and
Dan,
one
he
out.
got
Okay,
it.
I am
Just give
actively
it to him.
opposing what you believe about 1.5 pennies.
How do I defend myself against someone who's actively opposing what I believe in? Here's the way that I would state this is this. You need to ask yourself, I need to ask myself, is this a situation where I need to offer my input? I think that in one of the beautiful results of our incredibly interconnected socially driven world is that oftentimes, when I disagree with something or I don't like something, as Dan was commenting on our beloved, YouTube comments from time to time, like I feel as though there's an urge in me that I need to voice my dissent or my disagreement. It's critical that I post my bad review of my experience here. And ultimately it's the absolute opposite of a charitable orientation of heart. Right. So I think that there can be a tendency, especially that's facilitated by our modern cultural context, that if someone disagrees with me, I need to make my opinion known. Right. And I think we'd just do well to check ourselves there and ask, like, is it critical that I contribute to this conversation? Or can would I maybe do better to sit back and to wait?
Yeah.
And to exercise some discipline and some prudence here.
Yeah, this is actually an area, Aaron, that I really admire in you. And I've tried to emulate it some. I wonder, this is an area of weakness for me. And I'm wondering, like, what do you find yourself like, I guess, how did you find yourself like growing in that?
Mhm.
Because it seems to me, at least from what I understand from just you and I knowing each other, is that like you have strong opinions and you wrestle with things deeply. And earlier in your life, it seems like you came out and would really state those things. And then I wonder, like, what was the shift in your heart, or maybe like the experience, or was it just over time you realized that the fruit of what you were doing wasn't what you were looking for? I'm curious.
Yeah. It's funny. There's been a couple, people often say that, a talk that you hear will never be remembered a week from now or a month from now.
Sure.
There's been a couple that have really, a one-liner that's really stood out to me. And I don't even have any idea where it was from at this point, but somebody was speaking on the scriptural concept that you need to be quick to listen, slow to speak. I think it's from Proverbs, maybe.
Mhm.
Slow to speak and quick to listen. And I was really convicted by that message, and I've made it a discipline in my life that I want to be slow to respond and quick to try to receive the input from what's happening around me. And usually that allows me to adopt a more charitable perspective.
Yeah. Well, and more complete, because just taking an extra second or two. I don't care how fast people are. Like we have missionaries here that are incredibly fast witted. And even with them, if you take an extra second or 2 seconds, the way that thought is ironed out is it's just different.
Yeah.
There is a wisdom in waiting.
I think your point, Aaron, is you should just live the gospel, right? Like I think we forget some of the core teachings of Jesus because they're hard. But he says, "You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one to him as well. If someone wants to go to law with you over their tunic, hand them your cloak as well." Like, so turning the other cheek sometimes, or just not retaliating, not speaking, not defending, is the gospel response in a situation that Jesus encourages us. And I love that if someone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand him your cloak as well. So like, even, okay, I'm not going to speak ill of you, and I'm even going to be charitable to you. I'm going to give, like, I'm going to show greater charity. So I'm not only am I going to hold back, but now I'm going to give you more. And I think there's so much power in just living the gospel.
Yeah. Well, but I think the hard part there, because even when you're saying it, Dan, I don't know if we're ever given like the proper example when we hear that, right? Like it's like that's not a defeatism. That's not like a give up moment. That's a moment where the strength that's within me is greater than the strength I need to exude on this situation. Like I'm confident in what God has asked me to do. I'm confident in what I'm bringing. And if this person is coming against me here, I'm confident to stand here and like indefinitely.
Yeah.
Like there is like I don't even know. I was trying to think of like what I wanted to do when you said it was like, yeah, this movie. And like, there's not a lot of great examples of the moment when you're like belittled and mocked, but you don't have to respond, but you also didn't cower.
Yeah.
And like, it's just like,
I think it's when you know that you're doing what God wants you to do. When you are in line with God's will for your life, it doesn't matter if people are dissenting against that. And so it's like, I am doing what the Father has asked. I know I have checks and balances in my life to ensure that I am in line with God's will. And so you can oppose me all you want, but I'm already accepted.
I think you're right.
And you can't reject the one who's already been accepted by the Father.
Yeah, you can't take something from someone who's given everything away.
Yeah.
Like that is the paradox of the gospel. It's true. That's really good.
It's an important one to remind yourself every day.
Yeah, I've given it all to God. So anyone taking anything from me, I don't have anything left anyway. It's all his. Yeah. That's fascinating.
Beautiful. Well, hey guys, let's shift. I've got a couple more half cents I'd love to throw in there, but I think it's important that we move to our mission of the week.
Yeah.
Any takers on a mission of the week this time around?
Yeah, I have a mission of the week. I think we should actually make a list of the people who oppose what we believe in and pray for them. So just actually do good to your enemies and pray for your enemies. Spend time actively loving your enemies through prayer.
Yeah, this is for the other side of the coin, maybe no pun intended. But I think if your temperament is to walk away from conflict, I just want to invite you this week to stay in it with someone.
Nice.
So if you're in a moment of conflict with your spouse or a coworker or something like that, instead of immediately getting defensive and shutting it down or walking away, ask a follow-up question. Like stay in it a little bit longer. Like you're stronger than you think you are. And your ability to stay in those moments is what's going to make you a change agent. And it takes time and it takes discipline. And We'll probably screw it up the first time, but that's life in general, right? Like it's only by screwing it up that we learn how to do it better. So this week, if you find a moment of tension with your kid, spouse, coworker, you can put it in your own circumstance, but stay in it longer than you normally would. And even like journal about that afterwards, or take it to the Lord in prayer the next day. Don't allow it to just be like, yeah, I guess I kind of did that. Like really, like, yeah, make it a point to do that this week.
Beautiful. I've kind of got two missions of the week. Sorry. I didn't have the first one prepped, but Brad, you tore it out of me. One of the disciplines that I tried to grow in myself as I was trying to practice being slow to speak and quick to listen was in the context of conversation. When people are just tossing out ideas, oftentimes there's that tendency in me to want to be the one who delivers like the breaking concept. And I adopted a discipline of sitting back and actually praying that the Lord would deliver that concept through somebody else.
Yeah.
And being content to wait until I was the last one consulted in a conversation. And oftentimes it was really great. I work with a guy named AJ here at Damascus. It was a pretty consistent experience where I would have a great idea and I'd be so excited to share it. And then all of a sudden he would share it and I'd be like, yep.
Perfect. Yeah.
You're so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mission of the week this week, I just want to honor the person who sent in this question. I want to assume that you're not somebody who's struggling to understand your own self-worth and who's looking for a fight. This idea of really defending against good and meaningful conflict, I think, is important. And I would say when you come into conversation, do your homework so you can be well informed about the conversation that you're going to have, and enter with an attitude that if in the course of this conversation, I'm educated to a degree where I'm willing to change my mind, to be ready to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So always enter into a conversation where you feel like you're on the defense with a willingness to change.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for sending in your question. We love it. We couldn't do the show without you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hey guys, this has been an awesome show. Thank you for joining us for Beyond Damascus. Again, this is the show where encounter meets mission. We're grateful for all of you for listening. And if this show was edifying to you, or you think it could help somebody else out, please share it or of course, if you would like to have a question and follow up or a question answered for yourself, please comment. We do read the comments. We don't just ban people who disagree with us.
I didn't say we did.
No, that's true. That's true.
And it's always a pleasure to be with you here, friends. Remember this week that
mission makes sense.
There's sense in the jar.
God
Get it?
bless.
We did it. We did it.
We did it, guys.